So a month ago when we were up in South Haven, it was supposed to be a restful week where I could catch my breath, where I could relax. So naturally, a loan that we've been working on at Stonehenge for 2 months was trying to close that week. I spent all day Monday, I think most of Tuesday, on the phone going back and forth with their bank and the bank's lawyers and our client and our lawyers trying to figure out how to push it across the finish line. The banker was also on vacation. Their lawyer was leaving for vacation on Thursday, and our client was leaving Wednesday night. So at least 4 vacations were wrapped up in this thing, and none of us were getting the rest that we needed, the rest that we hoped for. How many of you have had a vacation like that? Or have you ever been sick on vacation? It's the worst, right? You're somewhere, you're headed out to rest, let your body recuperate, and usually you've been healthy for like the 15 months before that, but the week of vacation, your body decides this is when everything needs to fall apart. You're trying to do something good, but instead you just feel lousy. You want to go home and lay in your own bed. Vacations, they constantly get disrupted. I remember I was once on a conference call at work and a guy was calling in from a bathroom in Disney World. I'm grateful I would have never had to do that, but we've all had disruptions from times of rest. Not long after we had Charlotte, we rented a house in Florida. It was around Christmas time. The motion sensor in our alarm went off, and so Rachel and I are hunched over our phones trying to look at this grainy image from our living room to see if somebody had broken into the house. Turns out a stocking had not been hung by the chimney with care, and it had just fallen down. But we spent the whole week wondering, anxious, and it impaired our attempts to rest. We're talking about rest today, thinking about this in light of heaven. Heaven is a place of perfect rest, a place of ultimate peace. And we talk about this peace, we talk about this rest. It's more than just the absence of conflict or the absence of stress. It's a completeness, it's a wholeness, a peace about the way things are. We're all looking for this. Just go through the self-help section at the bookstore. It's overflowing with gurus and systems that offer us peace. There's so much noise and chaos in the world, and it has worked its way into our lives, into our bodies, into our hearts. I heard a news story the other day. They were talking about microplastics. Now they're finding them everywhere, including in the human body. And that's kind of what the chaos of the world is like. It has so thoroughly infiltrated every part of life. And it's made its way into us as well. So we are people in need of rest. And so as that people, we're going to talk about heaven today as a place where the deep and perfect rest, the peace of God are finally found. The book of Hebrews speaks about Sabbath rest that remains for the people of God. The book of Revelation promises rest for those who die in the Lord. Together, these passages, they give us a vision of peace and of rest that heaven offers. Not merely a break from toil, but the fulfillment of our deepest longings, what we were made for. So where do we get the concept of rest being something important? It's way back in the Genesis creation story in chapter 2 when God rests on the 7th day. God didn't rest because God was weary. God rested because things were perfect. They were complete. They were finished. God was enjoying the perfected creation. This is God's rest that we talk about characterizing heaven. There's a sense of completeness, a sense of wholeness, a finality to it. This is what the Bible is talking about when it talks about rest. Naturally, humanity comes and we disrupt this rest. Adam and Eve, they introduce sin through rebellion. Suddenly, there is no longer peace in creation. There is enmity between humans and God vertically and strife between humans horizontally. That's what we see the story of Cain and Abel. This is the legacy that continues to this day. It's why we have wars and violence and conflict and brokenness in society. It's why between every 4 plays of a football game, I'm hearing why Bernie Moreno or Sherrod Brown are going to destroy Ohio. There's conflict going on. We are not at peace with ourselves. We're not at peace one to another. We're not at peace with God. Our hearts are anxious. We try to settle them. We seek peace, but we try and get ultimate peace through non-ultimate sources. We try and secure ourselves with money, but we know that it runs out. We try and keep ourselves healthy and fit, but our bodies keep failing us. We try vacations, but we find stress there too. The deep rest that our souls crave, and they crave it because they were made for it. This rest keeps eluding us because we look for it in all the wrong places. We're like the old joke about the guy who's searching under the stoplight, and somebody asks him if he's looking for it, and he says he's looking for his keys. And they say, "Did you lose him here?" He goes, "No, I lost him over there, but the light's better here." The author of Hebrews is writing to Christians who are struggling under persecution and hardship, and he tells them that there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. This rest, the promise of heaven, a rest that restores what was lost in the Garden of Eden. And remember, we're between the gardens, between the Garden of Eden and the Garden in Revelation. And so the author of Hebrews is saying, lift up your eyes and look. Look up there. There is a rest that heals our restless hearts. And search for it in God. This is when Augustine says that our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. So the question is, right, how do we do this? How do we obtain this? And what the Gospels tell us is that we don't. The Gospels say Jesus Christ comes and does this for us. The Sabbath, it's supposed to be a practice day for our eternal rest, the command that was given in the 10 Commandments. It was meant where we did no work and we practiced for the endless rest of heaven. We brought a little piece of heaven into our lives in the here and now. We enjoyed God's favors. We rested in the idea that God is the one who makes things complete, not our work. How crazy is it, right? We needed a command to rest. Any parent, that feeling when you're arguing with your child, convincing them they need to go to sleep because they're exhausted and they're fighting it and they're fighting it and they're fighting it. And then you keep telling them they need to go to sleep and you can't believe they won't listen. It's like, just go to sleep. Everything will be better. And this is how we interact with God when it comes to Sabbath rest. God says, rest. You need rest. And we keep running. We fight the idea of rest because we say, I have to do a little bit more. I need to do a little bit more. And God says, no. What needs to be done has been accomplished in Jesus Christ. Right? We don't listen very well. We want to do it ourselves. But God says, I have done this. In Jesus' time, they had taken the Sabbath and they turned it into this incredible burden. In Matthew 12, it's interesting. Jesus shows up and he announces himself as the Lord of the Sabbath. It's a curious title, but it makes sense because he shows up as the fulfillment of God's Sabbath rest. He is the one who can deliver us into the eternal rest for which our souls were made. The soul level rest that we're chasing. What does he invite us to? In Matthew 11, he says, come to me, all you are weary and burdened. Does that fit anybody? Weary and burdened? He says, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus is offering rest from the burden of trying to justify ourselves. This is rest to be found in a relationship, rest to be received as a gift. We don't have to anxiously worry about not being enough, about how do we justify ourselves, because God is celebrating a work that is finished. Remember, back in Genesis 2, God rested because the work of creation was finished. Now think about, what does Jesus say on the cross? What are some of his last words on the cross? It is finished. The work of salvation is complete. The breach in the wall is repaired. Once more, we have access. Humanity has access into God's rest. And this is what Revelation is pointing us forwards. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds follow them. This is heaven as the ultimate fulfillment of Sabbath rest, a rest that will not be interrupted by the pains, the struggles of this life. In heaven, we will experience perfect peace, the peace we were made for, free from suffering, free from sorrow, free from sin. As with all things in Christianity, this is tremendously hopeful for the future. And it's meant to alleviate our anxiety in the present. In Hebrews 4, the writer tells us to make every effort to enter into that rest. And it's funny to think about, how do we work hard to rest? But the work is the act of trusting in Christ who makes the rest possible. That is the work that we are called to do, to learn the teachings, the miracles of Jesus' life, to study the history, to understand the truth of the gospel, because that allows us to rely on the work that Jesus has done. It allows us to have confidence that Jesus will do what he says he will do. He will bring us into that peace. And so when the world is chaotic, our souls can be at peace, anchored in Christ. This is why it's one of the commandments. This is why God tells us, practice this one day a week. Find time, make time to practice trusting in God, to stop working, to stop trying to earn it for yourself, stop trying to do it for yourself, stop trying to achieve, and just receive the grace of God, to trust in God that in Jesus Christ it is finished, it is complete. There is nothing more you need to do. There's nothing you can add to the work of salvation that has been done for you in Jesus Christ, but just rest. And one day a week we're to practice that. We should try and practice it more, but Jesus says the commandments say at least one day a week practice that, because then it works its way deep into us. Find a way to stop working, to stop trying to achieve, and just rest. Turn off the world's noise and rest. It's practicing for heaven. Because in heaven, all the things that disrupt our peace, the ultimate thing, sin, suffering, and death, will be gone. We'll be able to rest in the presence of God in a place where there's no more pain, no more striving, no more fear, no more anxiety. It will be perfect peace, perfect rest, perfect joy. This is the hope that sustains us as we navigate the trials of life. No matter what we fear, we know this rest, this perfection awaits us. The rest that comes from being in the presence of God, where things are made right, where we experience the fullness of God's peace. So I want to close with some words from the 23rd Psalm. They remind us that we have a good shepherd who's looking out for our needs, which means we don't have to be anxious for them. And what does that good shepherd want to do for us? To help us rest. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul.